Welcome back. It is Bones. And in this one, let's go ahead and get our first look at some new figures coming out from McFarlane. Now, I have seen these images floating around for a couple of days. I was just waiting to make sure and settle in and be positive that these images were getting spread around because, of course, we don't want McFarlane coming after us. But it is pretty safe, I think, now. These are some renders that have been released to the public. Now, of course, these are just renders, so there can be details or different changes that are made before they are officially released. And I am not exactly sure. I think most of these are gold labels, but I'm not 100% sure on what they are going to be released at, but they more than likely are going to be from the DC Multiverse. Now let's go ahead and start off big, and that is with Nightwing. Now, this is actually a figure that people have been really anticipating, and this is actually one of the first things I did find. If you put it into your search, these were the first images that came up was Nightwing. Now it looks like this will actually be used on the Blue Beetle Booster Gold Buck. A big giveaway from this is the fact that the wrist joints are really identifiable. I could see them. They have that same sculpted silhouette that the other figures that have been released before actually have, so that's a dead giveaway. I think the biggest negative of this Nightwing figure is the fact that, once again, I don't know why McFarlane cannot fix this. I think Omega is one of the figures that has a completely plain calf, like from the below the knee to the ankle. And they just went ahead and repainted Nightwing's boot design right over the line that is from the original Buck. Now, I mean, this is pretty atrocious, but it has been done to basically most of the figures that have been released. So, I mean, what do we expect? Now, I think some of the big positives of this figure is, of course, the head sculpt looks really designed after the way it was in the comics. I really like the way they did the belt over the existing trunks. It looks pretty clean and crisp. And while a lot of the other details are painted on, the only obvious difference I could see is that most of the figures released before on this Buck have paint all the way up. You know, the whole neck is painted, and this is the first one that actually has a neckline with skin tone. So, I mean, pretty sure it's going to be just a painted on neckline, but that can look really good as long as it is nicely painted. And another interesting detail is that they did put a sort of Nightwing disc in his palm. So this would probably give us an idea of one of the accessories that will come with this figure. All in all, he looks really good. I think besides the negative of the boots, and maybe some people won't be happy with the thickness of the body, because this isn't really like a young teen body, but it's not necessarily like a big, beefy, muscular male body. It's kind of in between, which is a reason why it's a good Buck to use with your standard male figures. But all in all, it looks like a really nice figure and will be an awesome addition to your Nightfall shelf. Up next, we have the vampire Damian Wayne from DC versus Vampires. Now, I mean, aside from the awesome new vampiric head sculpt that we're going to get, it is used on the same Infinite Frontier body, has the same upper body, and the same boots. So this figure, I mean, it's nice to add it to our vampire unliving army, but it's not, nothing spectacular. Pretty sure this will be a gold label at Walmart because that's what all the other vampire versions have been. We always did have a hunch that all the vampires are going to basically be repaints, but it's still a cool figure to add to the collection. Now, up next, we have a pretty nice figure, and it is an Owlman figure. I think it was, pretty sure it's from the Forever Evil storyline. Now, this one is pretty cool because it is, in my opinion, a good reuse of a body. Basically, they gave us a brand new, awesome Owlman head that actually represents the storyline, but they did mix it up and add different details, which will actually make it worth picking up. Now, although the cape is the same cape from the Crime Syndicate Owlman, It does look like they gave it a little bit of a silver tone with like some metallic in there. Although you do get the same sort of claw hands, the actual upper glove parts are different than the original release. But all of this is placed on the same original body. And that moves us down to the belt, which is actually pretty nice because the original release was more of a pouch Owlman belt, and this one is more of a capsule belt, which actually references more the comic images of Owlman. And this actually takes us down to the bottom. The boots are the exact same boots from the original release, but they are painted black in a different color. And so that is always appreciated. Now, this is actually an awesome figure that I'm really anticipating on picking up. And where a lot of lines would only give us one Owlman, this is actually the second version that we have received from McFarlane. So that is pretty awesome. Now, coming up next, we're going to take a look at Red Tornado. Now, this one is actually based off of the Alan Scott body book. You can see some of the familiar scope work. Like, one of the biggest things I saw right away is the belt. And some people might be a little bit miffed at this, that they just painted the belt yellow. But actually, it does work. There has actually been figures released before where he had a belt. And I'm pretty sure in some references in the comics or in the storylines, he actually has a belt. But a lot of the times, it is actually just a painted line. Now, once again, we get an awesome new Android head sculpt for this figure, which looks really good. Now, this is another instance of great reuse. They have taken the like sort of big collared cape from Alan Scott with the medallions and beautifully reused it for Red Tornado. So I'm not mad about that at all. It actually looks really good. And when we go down to the bottom, he actually has some pretty nice Buccaneer style boots. And this could have been actually easily accomplished because I did notice that the Alan Scott, his boots were sort of floating on top of the like that front calf part. So it did seem like you could pull those off and just swap them out with another part, which it seems like what they did here. And just to throw in my own little ideas, they do have this accessory of the whirlwind. And, maybe they might package this up with Red Tornado. I could see a lot of people like popping them in half and putting them inside here and actually taking some awesome figure photography. Now, of course, this was from Cyclone from the Black Adam movie. So this would actually be an awesome reused accessory. But as always, that's just the thoughts of a madman. So take it with what you will. And now coming in next, we actually have another banger from McFarlane, and that is going to be Animal Man. Now, once again, he does use that Blue Beetle Booster Gold Buck, but it fits perfectly for this figure. But once again, the glaring thing is that they used the same boost with the same boot lines and just painted his boot style over it. It's going to be the same thing until they learn to reuse parts from different figures. But until then, we're just going to have to keep putting up with this same buck that they just paint the boots over. Now, once again, they are coming in hot with another awesome head sculpt of Animal Man. The only thing I could think is, are we going to get clear goggles? I honestly doubt it. I actually think they're going to be painted to give like a sort of little like 3D effect, like kind of how they did the classic Blue Beetle, where it has a little bit of shine on one side of the lens to give it sort of that transparent look, but really it's just painted on detail. Now, actually, I have my biggest complaint of this figure, and that is that there is no jacket. I'd have to say at least 80% of the time, 90% of the time that you see Animal Man, he has a jacket. And although it can switch around from like a sort of leather looking jacket to more of like a like a poofy members only jacket, but he is usually portrayed with a jacket. Even DC Universe Classics did this. And although this does leave the door open for them to do another version of Animal Man with the jacket, it is kind of a letdown for me because that is usually how I picture Animal Man, except for his initial appearance in the comics. But that does also give me some ideas to where I'm actually already preparing parts that I'm going to use. It's actually going to be maybe 2 or 3 jackets that I use to build one Animal Man jacket. And of course, this makes this figure really exciting for me because I know I'm going to have to pick up multiple versions to do my custom, which is actually my preferred collecting habit. But that Animal Man does look really good. That's one of the ones I'm really anticipating. And now we have saved the best for last. And that is, I was waiting for this, and that is your classic Superman. And honestly, it is kind of a letdown because this seemed like it was going to be our last hope to get a brand new Superman buck body mold. And actually, what we have received is just a repainted Page Puncher's body, which a lot of people are actually a fan of. They love this body. And I don't necessarily see anything wrong with them using it. The only thing I would say is that this is not the classic suit of Superman. This is actually a more modern take on Superman. And all they really did was give him his classic costume palette, where he has the baby blue with the more deeper red. And so it's not necessarily your classic Superman. It's kind of a mixture between the classic colors and a more modern suit. And although the trunks are not the traditional trunks, they can be swapped out if you have an extra pair of, the more classic trunks. But the boots are a complete departure from the classic style, and they're more of a new version. So this is another figure that people are going to have to probably have a lot of fun kit bashing it and changing out parts to make their own preferred Superman version. Now, also, I'm not a big fan of this cape, although I find it not too bad. I'm just not a super fan of this version of the Superman cape, which of course was the same one they used on the Page Puncher Superman and the Vampire Superman. But I do think there is a bright side, and that is the goofy, sort of Boy Scout looking head sculpt that they gave him, which is more of a classic Superman look, which we could have a lot of fun with, like using it for alt heads of different Supermans. But that does take us into the final injustice that they did to us, and that is that it looks like they are going to give him the same giant hands. These definitely do look like the same meat hooks that came with the original Page Punchers, which everybody knows were way too big. So we are going to have to figure out some hand swapping options to give them a little bit more normalized hands and fists, but that's not a big problem. But just by looking at the render, it does look like he has those same mitts that he had from the Page Punchers. But basically, even though I'm not too happy with it, it is a pretty nice looking figure. Of course, this is another one that's gonna have to be bought in multiples to do your customizing and kit bashing and making it a little bit more fun, and at the same time having people make their own ultimate versions of Superman. But anyways, guys, that's what we have to look forward to. These figures should be, coming out really quick because the turnaround for McFarlane is usually not that long. It'll be here before we know it. But you guys, keep hunting out there, keep collecting, keep customizing, and I will see you on the next one.
They used to call me Crazy Joe, but now they can call me Fat Man.